Welcome to Horror Movies and Beyond, a show about reviewing horror movies for the living to understand the dead. I'm your host, Ivotres Littles, and this is Shudderary, where we go behind the screens of Shudder original and exclusive movies. Today, I have a really awesome special guest. She's a horror content creator and a very talented photographer, Emma Buntrock Muller. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. As I was joking earlier, I'm a very, sometimes I feel like a very much and the rest guest, but I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk to you. I see you all over TikTok and here and there. We comment on each other's stuff and like each other's stuff, but finally get to speak to you. This is exciting.
It's exciting. This is talking about horror movies and eating are like the number two things in my life. So it's like
when's your birthday?
Valentine's Day.
Oh. Well.
When it's labor Friday the 13th, and I was born February 14th on a Saturday.
Oh, wow. Sound like it was planned.
I know, but it wasn't. It's just a coincidence.
Well, like I said, thank you for joining me on this Shudderary. I really do appreciate it. I love talking to people about horror movies, and you picked Satan's Slave, but we'll get into that. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I've loved horror movies since I was young. Even before I can remember, my mom said I used to watch He-Man. I don't remember this because I was hardly sentient. And whenever Skeletor was on the screen, I get really excited. So apparently, I don't remember. My mom tells me this. So she's like, so you were into that stuff so early. So when it comes to my art, I'm one of those people that likes a lot of different mediums. So it's becomes hard to define exactly what I do. I try to all circle it back to the photography, because if I build something, I can make it part of an image, and I kind of express, some of the darker things that I've felt or been through in my life through that, and I hope for other people it's kind of like a companionable darkness sort of a thing. I remember VHS. I love VHS. The first VHS that was I had to build up to it, because as a little kid I knew that I wasn't going to be allowed to rent it. And it was Hellraiser. I would see the box, I had no idea what any of it meant. I knew it was a horror movie. I had no but I just saw it and I'm like, I am terrified of that and I want to be all about it at the same time. So Hellraiser holds a special place in my heart, but I'm also one of those frustrating people that when you ask me what's your favorite, and I'm like, I can't pick. I like so many of them. So that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Well, I completely understand growing up and seeing scary VHS boxes, but unlike my family, they brought them home for us to watch as a family. It was a normal thing for us. So I've seen everything.
They like horror family, like horror movies too?
Yeah, horror movies was just normal. We would go to the VHS store on the way home on Friday. It was mostly Friday nights, Saturday nights. We would go to the local burger stand or just go to get pizza and just grab as many as we could, because I believe they were $1 to rent. If you wanted a newer one, it was $2. and we just grabbed it. Yeah, it was good. And then we just watched them together as a family, scared to death, or my sister and her friends, or we would just all pile up in the living room and sleeping bags and just scare ourselves to death. And that was just normal.
That's so siblings. I have a sibling that's very much younger than me, so I pretty much grew up as an only child. So I watch movies alone. Um, but I'm from a very small town. It's like 5,000 people, so it's not the smallest town in the world, but it's pretty small in New England. And there wasn't a Blockbuster near us, so the video place was called Video Junction. Because the town was like half Richie's and then half like Hick, and so Video Junction was like my favorite place.
That sounds definitely like a lot of fun.
It was.
So let's get right into Satan's Slave. There will be spoilers, so if you have not seen it, please go over to Shudder. It is streaming right now. Before you do that, like and subscribe and leave a comment later. We'll talk about that. But if you're going to stick around, there will be spoilers, so we warn you.
Stay and spoil with us, you know.
So why did you pick Satan's Slaves?
Okay, so there's a couple reasons. As you know, you described that you wanted the guest to pick the specific Shudder original, and I'm so wishy-washy. I'm like, oh, I want them to talk about a movie they really like, so I sent you a list of like, these are movies I talk about. It was quite long, and you're like, no, pick a movie. In the most polite way. So Satan's Slaves was one I really sat down to watch, and it really, the beginning really spooked me out. Like, it was the first time in a long time, and there's another Shudder original that became the next one, like, where I felt like a little kid again. Like, I felt really spooked, you know, and I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that feeling. Like, I don't want to turn the lights out. Like, so, and then when I was like branching out on the list I gave you, I realized, because, you know, it's written down right like in front of me, that Joko Anwar, the director, also did Impetigore, which I really liked. He wrote and directed that one. He wrote and directed Satan's Slaves, and he wrote The Queen of Black Magic, and I liked that one too. But the thing about Satan's Slaves is, I didn't know when I first watched it, but this is like a remake / prequel, which I did not know when I first watched this. Which which you can watch the movie and not know that, and it's fine. But he watched this movie as a child. When sometimes he'd sneak into the theater when he didn't always have the money, so he lives kind of like in a harsh background, and he like used horror movies and martial whatever was available in Indonesia, where he grew up and still lives. I believe he still lives there. It was like a coping mechanism for him, and I relate to that. And this is one of the movies that once he became a filmmaker, like, he was always like bugging the studio, like, hey, someone remaking Satan's Slaves, because I can do it. I could do it. And so, like, over and over again. So he made these 2 shorts, and one's like, I think, called Burial Shroud. The other one's called Jenny. And he wanted to make sure he did a really good horror short and really focused on the shrouds that, you know, he is, Indonesia is primarily Muslim, and he's Muslim. So when the dead are buried, they have these certain special cloth that they're buried with. So he really wanted to emphasize that, because that's a big part of like the spirits in the original. And then after he did those, he's like, I finally got it. I get to do Satan's Slaves. So he was really, really, really happy. So since it was such a passionate project of his, I thought that, like, it's good to talk about. And I related. I related to his story, and I like this movie. It's very traditional in a way.
Mm-hmm. Satan's Slaves is a Shudder original and is Indonesian film. They categorize it as a gothic horror. When I watched this film, it reminded me of a couple of movies. It reminded me of Night of the Living Dead, the Conjuring series, because of the mom, and for the Conjuring, it reminded me of the nun, and then how she looked throughout. The mom, is it the mom or a different spirit that just happens to look like her? We'll get into that. But yeah, so has really a familiar style, and it has that zombie type thing going on too. But it's really about this really well. They seem to be a close family that has a problem, and their mother is sick, very sick. You don't know exactly what she has when you first see her, but she just looks terribly sick. And when you meet the daughter, I think her name is Rini, or I'm not sure how they
Rini
say
is
it.
the
Rini?
oldest sibling.
She's the oldest daughter that we see her at a studio trying to get, the funds, the royalties, because her mom's was a famous singer. And back then, I guess they look at singers as like artists and not, not successful, even though she seems to be successful at the time when she was singing. It just looked as a bad thing. I don't know. Different cultures for different people. And they got whatever's left of the money and to pay for bills and medical costs. And then from then on, it just gets weird. Even the first scare you see, well, it wasn't even the first scare. I got scared when we see her, sick and everything. And remember when the the beginning, when the bell is ringing, you meet like the kids, and the bell rings, and the bell rings, if you pay attention, 3 times. And I was like, because for the first time, this is my second time seeing it. When I saw it, the first time I didn't notice, but the second time I was like listening to the bell and it ring it 3 times. Now, if there's some kind of religion you're into, 3 times for Christianity or whatever is related to that means the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. However, in this situation, also looked it up again. 3 bells ringing mean impending doom, death. Someone's going to die or get ready to die.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
So if you hear her ring the bell, it's always 3 times in intervals.
Wow.
So that was something I looked up, because I was like, there got to be a reason for that. It just can't be 3. I mean, anybody could just be like ringing, but or kept ringing, but no, it was like ring, 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 stop, ring, 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 stop. So I'm guessing it's for that. But yeah, that's what I definitely noticed in that situation. And then, we meet the mom, and she's like freaking out, staring at something, and she's like ringing it like crazy, and we don't see anything. And then the daughter walks out, and then you see a reflection of the mom in the bed, and the camera is getting closer and closer, and then it just Satan slaves. The title, but in Indonesian. I was looking like I waiting to see something, and it like completely caught me off guard.
Well, like with this film, like the first, like we see her go after she comes back from being in the city, as you were talking about, talking to the producer for the record deal, trying to get money. They live in the grandmother's home. It's the grandmother's home, so the mother of the sick mother. So, the matriarchal family. 4 children, dad, grandma, and, they're trying to keep this house, or they have so much debt because of the medical bills. And the tone immediately changes when she comes home. She's talking to the second oldest child, who's Tony, who's a 16-year-old boy. And the moment we hear that bell, I'm like, the whole tone changes when we hear the bell. And when we first see Rini going up the stairs, I noticed it's not exactly the same, because Hitchcock and Psycho had like the stairs from like directly above. But I remember his story about the crew had originally shot for Psycho, seeing the steps go up and then seeing the hand go up, and he says that seems like more of the call of somebody that is nefarious. We want to see this detective, spoilers for Psycho, by the way, the detective going up the stairs, he's going to be the victim. And so it's very similarly positioned. So it kind of like adds to that tension there. And we can tell that Rini is a little bit more afraid of her very ill mother. And Tony, the 16-year-old, the second oldest, is probably the closest to her. And like, if you had to separate it into 3 acts without getting too ahead of it, like, there's the beginning where we know the mother, and when we'll talk about the scene, of course, when the mother passes away, they have a funeral. Second act, to me, you let me know if you see it differently, is when grandma dies. And then they find grandma's letter. They're starting to put stuff together. They meet grandma's friend. And then the third act is after the cult. Don't worry, guys. We're gonna like catch you up. The act is after the cult people leave, and they're like, "Oh yeah, everything's cool now." Way too early. And then that's the third act of the movie. So that's why I feel like the tone shifts in this film. But at the same time, because it's not an American film, because I feel like an American horror maker, unless it's like very indie, has a certain contract with the audience that certain things aren't going to happen. And like in the very early part of the film, we see the youngest child. His name's Ian, and he's 6, about to turn 7. And we see him hiding in a box outside the house. It's just like a normal trunk box. We see him hiding in the box, like, whatever. We don't think anything of it. And then later on in the film, they can't find him, and they're scared. And then the oldest sister goes outside, because this apparently is a normal hiding place for this child. So it makes her to look there. And she opens up the box outside, and the kid's not moving. And I like that was really that really stirred me. And I'm like, nah, mom, but but like, I feel like there's a certain contract with an American film more so, where I would have been more confident, like, oh, the kid's okay. But for me anyway, I was more nervous, like it would, because that the youngest child doesn't become important until later. So it's not, it felt reasonable that something might have actually happened to him.
He always have to be aware, and I love that they do sign language and to communicate with him. So to me, I feel like when all this weird stuff was starting to happen, how do you communicate that to a child, that weird stuff is happening? Because even when there was a part where he had to go to the bathroom, and it was I think it was Bondi. Is it Bondi? The 10-year-old, the brother. Yeah, he was asleep, but Ian jumped out of bed and was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. So he was like doing his little sign language, trying to tell him, and he's just walking around, so he can't hear anything. So if something is being said, or weird noises, he has no idea until when he went to go to the bathroom, and then Bondi shows up, and they're going back, and then they see like that weird painting of their mother after she passed away. She at this point, she's already had passed away in a very interesting way. Man, it was just, that was creepy. That was okay. I think I jumped the gun, but the daughter, when she saw her mom the first time, when she woke up in the middle of the night and went to go check on her mom because her mom was ringing the bell, and she walked in and was like, Mom, what are you doing out of bed? And then find out her mom is still laying in the bed and like shaking the hell out of that bell. And then she wakes up, and then it happens again. There's a bell ringing, and she goes in there, and then this time she looked in the bed while her mom was supposed to be, in there, but your mom wasn't in there. She was standing there, and then her mom just turned into, just fell out with her mouth open. I always wondered what's up with that, because even The Ring, when people have died, their mouths are open and they have this blank stare, like.
And I've done post-mortem care as a nursing assistant, so watching the body. People don't look like that, but it's less than a minute where you have to make sure that which doesn't often happen, so it has to happen, in the funeral home, is closing the jaw and closing the eyelids. Otherwise, they're both going to be open. Mm-hmm. I know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be specific.
No. But okay, maybe they use that information as to a body is dead or dying, or scared to death, that their eyes and mouth is open. And but back to that scene with the two kids, and they was walking back to the bedroom, and that picture scared him. He was like, I'm going to cover it, with a sheet. He throws a sheet, and it forms into a person standing there. I thought that was pretty good. That would have scared crap out of me as a kid.
That scared me. And I read some reviews, and some folks were saying, "Oh, I don't like the jump scares." And I think, like, one of the only little critiques I have of the movie is there are scenes in this and there's that scene with Tony, the oldest son, when his mother's in his room and he has the hair in his hand. There's very scary moments in this movie, but the score is so amplified. The non-diegetic music, that I feel like it takes away from the scare a little bit. Like it could have been dead silent and it would have been a little bit scarier. It still scared me though. But like if I had to make a criticism, that was like one of the ones of like, whenever there's something legit scary happening, like there's a reason to be scared, but that music is like way up. It's way up.
Yeah.
11.
Yeah, the music was pretty up there. That scene was pretty clever. And then it just comes at them and he's screaming. And the poor boy who's deaf can't hear anything. He doesn't know, if his brother was screaming. I mean, it's just, gosh, I couldn't imagine going through, can't hear what I'm trying to think. There was a movie where they couldn't hear anything, but something was coming.
The Quiet.
No matter. Well, I was thinking something older. That's a good one, but I was trying to think of an old. Well, there's one you can't see. I guess that doesn't matter. Anyway, never mind. I'll be sitting here like really looking for it.
Fine, huh? But different sensory thing from Beyond, where blind woman. Mm-hmm. Different, but I can't imagine. But in this movie, it's hard because he's 6, just about to turn 7. So it's already a very difficult time for him as a very young child. All the spooky stuff going on. His mother died, and he probably only she's been sick, they say, for 3 years. So he probably only ever really remembers his mom being sick, but it's still scary, that the kids, don't process the things the same way as adults do. And then, and then also and then having a hearing impairment is it adds to it. It's like you're already young and don't process things the same, even as your 10-year-old brother. And then, so, and he's that kid is adorable until the end.
He was looking out after their mom passed away. He was looking out the window because you could see him very, very faintly, and they stay, standing up and coming. And then while he's looking, we see the blanket coming, and it's, it's like, oh crap. But it was actually Ian, and he was like, oh my God, there's, zombie monster or whatever out there. And then he said, well, there's some smart zombies know how to use a flashlight. I was like, well, back then, well, yeah, that would probably, because this movie takes place, this was 2017, I believe it came out.
1981, because 1982 is when the first one happened, so they...
Yeah, but then, it came out in 2017, but it takes place in 1981. And I was thinking, like, back then, yeah, they would probably be a little better with the flashlights, of course, the zombies. But now zombies, they run, swim, drive cars, and have sex. Zombies are different now.
They evolved. interesting. The in the 80s, like the Indonesia itself didn't have a big film industry that, especially
Mm-mm.
where they were making their own films. Is that the first they were part of the Dutch East Indies, and then the way they got out of that, they unfortunately were occupied by the Japanese in the Second World War, and then after that, they're like, finally, they're like, we don't need anybody. We're independent, thank you. And but it didn't happen until the 1980s, where there was a big boom of Indonesian cinema. So that's probably I assume that maybe because that was such a, I wonder if Night of the Living Dead was one of the ones that did get sent over, you know.
Mm.
Because well, I was watching some interviews with the director, and he said it was usually a lot of Malaysian films and American films that would be sent over. So that's just
Probably because I mean, Night of the Living Dead was out way before then, so I mean, I would guess that because this film I saw a lot of that. I saw,
yeah.
the way the zombies were or undead or spirits, whatever they may be. But the way they were moving, the way, things were happening, it just felt like that when they were bunched in the house and they run outside and then they're like, walking towards them in sheets, but the sheets that they were buried in.
And I remember an interest because I don't know much about the Muslim faith. So like I did some because I was thinking, well, is Satan like, Satan's slave? So is Satan the same? Like, as I'm agnostic, so but I know more. I live in a very Christian country, being in America. I'm like, do I have the same idea of what Satan is like? And so I looked it up, and it is similar. It is very similar. And but there was one I've heard of a jinn before, but I only have a vague idea, and I still only have a vague idea. But what's something interesting about the jinn, which there's a conversation, Tony and Rini, the oldest children, are trying to figure out what's going on with all this. Why is all this happening? And one question is, well, because Tony, he's like the second oldest brother,
Mm-hmm.
Who is closest to mom, he's like, that's not mom. That's not mom. And then Rini asked, is it a jinn? And he said, no, it's older than that. Older than like the Islamic religion. And the thing that I found interesting about the jinn, which it's hard to say, how much of there's a lot of spirits in this, could be jinn. The thing that I find interesting about jinn is that they are parallel to humans. They're spirits, but they have free will, so they can choose to go to, God, Allah, or I wrote the name of the devil down, but I'm probably it's Iblis. So, or they could go to Satan, so they have a free will sort of idea. So when we come to talking about Ian more specifically, I wonder, like, because there's going to be a sequel to this film, I wonder, like, how destined he is to be good or bad.
Well, I don't know, because I got there were a couple of things I got confused about this movie. One is what the mom was sick with, because if she was part of some cult, because like I said, her and her husband, they didn't have, their grandma's or his mother's blessing for them getting married, because she was like a singer, and they just, for some reason, they ain't in for that. So and they couldn't have any kids. They believe they, having problems, cursed, so they joined some kind of satanic cult or whatnot. And in that cult, she was having, sex with the cult members. So all the kids look a little different. But the last one, Ian, when did she have sex with Satan? Because it turns out he was an offspring. And I got confused with that part, but then I was like, well, because every time you have to offer your child for sacrifice before their 7th birthday. So all the kids' ages are at 6 years apart, except for the last one. So she didn't have another kid um after Ian. So does that mean the Satan's offspring jumped to each child until she until she kept going? And then when did she get sick, and did someone make her sick so she could stop to have kids? Because it seemed like she was gonna keep going. um I don't know, that kind of, I don't know,
Those
did
are
you?
questions, because it's like so the way the kids kind of figure out that there's a cult even involved is they see that so mom dies, lots of spooky stuff happens, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everyone's and everyone experiences the spooky things, on their own. And Rini, the oldest daughter, finds a letter. Grandma dies. She like all the people. All of a sudden, she's in the well, which is like,
Yeah.
well, it's a well that's like, it's not like a hole in the ground. Like, it's above well, and the cops are like, oh, she slipped. I'm like, how do you do that? You had to climb into that thing. How did someone slip into that? She was in a wheelchair. She slipped. Oh man, cops in horror movies never very. But anyway, or they just don't want to deal with it. Older one, but anyway, grandma, who she has a sense of she before she dies, she's written a letter to an old friend of hers, and Rini, the oldest daughter, finds this letter and then goes into the city to find this friend, as a link to, maybe there's a link here to what's going on. And this older friend is like a high school mate of hers, and he knows all about like the spooky,
Mm-hmm.
like our savant. Rini visits this old friend of her grandmother's, and he's the
Mm-hmm.
savant, right? He knows all this spooky stuff, and he tells them about their mother having trouble getting pregnant, and that the mother never really blessed the union of their father, and but he's really their father. He raised them. He's their father. That's how um and he starts talking about this, tells them about this cult that, like, if you can't get pregnant, you can offer yourself to Satan, and then you have like ritualistic sex in the cult, which, they never describe it. Like, they say it has to be a cult member, and dad's not in this movie until like the end. Like, once mom dies, dad's like, I got business in the city, I'll be back. so so we don't really know dad at this point that much.
Mm-mm.
He seems nice enough, right? But so we don't really know like how involved, if he joined the cult too. But the big point was that it was a cult member that probably got her pregnant, and that you do this so many times, as many times as you want, but the big thing is the last child belongs to Satan, and that the last child will be taken, because the last child doesn't belong to you. Now, I think of like Rosemary's Baby, right? Like you were saying, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
like, if he's like half Satan, like, did she have like freaky deaky with like Satan, like Rosemary did, or was it like, it was one of the cult members, but Satan like thought hard about it, and like before the
Mm-hmm.
baby was born. I don't know. We don't know
Well,
that information, but it ends up being true that Ian is
well,
that.
they said it was his offspring.
Yeah.
So, but see, I get I get that whole thing with the guy telling them the story about their mom, but what it was just confusing, because if it's the last child, that means she kept having kids.
So she didn't have to
So
get away.
yeah, um, but if let's just say the oldest one, Rini, like if she stopped at her, would that be Satan's offspring
I,
or the son? Like, do you see me, like each one jumped? Does it jump, or are they all Satan's offspring until the last one?
see that
I mean, I was
they don't
trying to
explain that.
understand.
Don't, and it's like in the contract, they're like, you probably gotta have at least two, because if you just have one, you can't keep it. All right, that's
Yeah.
twice, okay, lady. I mean, and you're kind of pretty, so we like you. But no, but yeah, but I figure, because it's So that's why she kept having kids. And her becoming sick, it's not made clear to us if she became sick because Satan's like, okay, lady,
Yeah.
I need this
Yeah.
offspring. I need this child now. I need this soul. We're gonna end this having baby shit, okay? So so we don't know if that happened or if she just did get very ill from, like, if I had to assume, I would assume cancer, but it could have been something else because she had a lot of medical treatments, and that's part of why they're in such a financial strain. But it's a very serious illness. So we don't know if that happened because devil's got a clock, or if she actually just did get sick, so she couldn't have. She knew that even if she didn't get sick, there's a point where she can't keep having children. Eventually she's
Yeah.
gonna have to give up the last one.
Remember when after her funeral, all those guys were in there chanting, and then you had the son and the father sitting in there, and they were kind of looking like, "What is this?" They had like an interesting look on their face of puzzled or not
The
knowing what's going on.
See, the way I see that is, so later in the movie when they're trying to figure out if this cult thing's true, right? The two oldest children, the
Hmm.
Tony, is the son, the oldest son is like, remember when we'd have those functions when mom was well, and there'd just be these random, like, randos at the party? And she's like, I guess so. I guess I always thought they were like mom's, like, contacts or family. He's like, yeah, I asked about it once, and they were like really weird about it. It was
Hmm.
they show all the pictures. Um, the funeral, and I only know this because I looked it up for the movie. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. Um, when in the Muslim faith, it's part of the community's responsibility to, like, do the ceremony of washing the body and saying, there's a word for it, but saying a prayer, like a communal prayer afterwards. And another theme of this film is that this family that we're so connected with really has kind of not been connected to their faith in a long time, and that's
Hmm.
part of it. But like you were saying, like those weird looks, like who gets to decide who's part of the community, right? It's not the whole town. So it's like there's like these guys that it's like, you think of dads like, oh, that's the guy that fucked my wife. Like, it's like, that's that dude.
But does he know? I mean, it's just he's still a
No,
puzzling.
dad knows. I don't know how involved dad was. Like, I don't know if dad actually joined the cult, because there was a moment when the oldest daughter, when he comes back from his business in the city, and a lot's gone down, and dad hasn't had to deal with any of it. But he said, the oldest daughter said, I saw you talking to mom before she died. What were you saying to her? Like, she was very serious
Hmm.
about it. And he said, I just, because he doesn't know they know all this stuff, right?
Hmm.
He said, I just told your mother that I love all my children, and I didn't want any of my children to suffer. And so it kind of, he really seemed earnest about it. And so it seemed kind of to
Hmm.
me that he didn't join this cult, or if he did, he wasn't really like in it, like he just didn't want to deny her whatever chance she could have to have a child that she wanted so
So
badly.
you believe he does know that she was
Yeah.
being passed around
Passed around.
willingly,
It's
willingly
funny
passed
because
around.
it's funny to me because I picture the same thing in my head, because we've watched so many horror movies. Like, she could have just had sex with one dude, but we've watched enough horror movies, like, All the Colors of the Dark and stuff. It's always like a bunch of them. It's never just like we never see a flashback or anything, but like you just kind of feel it, like, it, like
Hmm.
it was everybody. And that's no judgment, whatever your thing, dealing with evil, not good, but hey, you do you. um
So what did you think? To just move it along a little bit, just what do you think when everybody started coming from the graves? Every the guy's trying to run to to give them the letter, show the letter. He gets in a terrible accident. The daughter finds the letter. I mean, you have all these multiple things happening to the point where now we're starting to see it really unravel. Things are coming from the forest and the dead, and then the little Ian. We can't trust him anymore because we starting to see what he is, and at the same time, his brother Bondi was trying to kill him.
He
I mean,
like he was gonna be the weird kid before we knew it was the last child, because
yeah.
he was chanting to himself, which wasn't common in the beginning for him. Like I like once
I think that was a spirit trying to prevent that from happening, kill the last kid.
Mhm.
I thought it was whatever the bad spirit was, like, he was the chosen one, but no, I think the mom, because whatever spirit that is, it's not the mom, has trying to say, okay, I don't want this to happen, kill him.
and grandma. Like
Oh yeah, that's
we
true.
see dead grandma later briefly. Like I so like once everyone's on the same page, all the spooky stuff's been happening. The savant is in the story to an extent. Um, dad's home. Everyone's on the same page. Okay, we all know about Mom's freaky deaky cult, and that yeah, freaky deaky cult, and that the last child is who on his 7th birthday. Which, oh my god, tomorrow's Ian's 7th birthday, the youngest child's birthday. Um, then of course it's raining, because why not? It's raining. It's dark. The cemetery is right outside their house.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, like City of Living, like very Fulci. Um, and we see people. We don't see their faces. We just see people standing with their umbrellas, like, and we see them like just drop something on the ground. I only know this from listening to an interview with the director, where he said that they drop the pomegranate because that tells the dead where to go. It leads the dead to the path, the right.
Mm.
So that's why the cult was there, just to let the dead, hey, dead army, this is your spot. This is your spot. And that's what happens the next night.
Yeah, yeah. See, at that point, I would have just left, but no, they decided to sit and wait for the truck that never showed up. I would have walked the city. I would have walked. I would have walked home.
I would have
There is no. It's daylight at this point. I mean,
because I wouldn't have.
I would have left.
Cult would just give up. Like, oh well, we tried one night, you guys.
Yeah, it was time to go.
Supernatural,
And
like those creepy folks are coming back, and we can't be here. But they seem cool with it. So that's another little criticism of the movie, even though I love the movie, is that
mm-hmm.
that's one of those, like, it's a little bit of a suspension of disbelief that's a little too far, that they got way too comfortable too soon, that like
Yeah.
I guess because it was a terrifying night, but you really think that even if it's just cult members, like even if there's nothing supernatural, it's just these weird people, you don't think they're gonna come back? I would be gone.
Well, they came back, but it wasn't them. It was a bunch of zombies, and then they just kind of took over the house, and finally, they made their way out.
That's a lot of
You
great
have to,
dead scenes.
I have to leave the sun behind, but as long as we
but
get away.
they got to live. So, like, yeah, with the this army of the living dead, they look cool because they have the shrouds on, and we even see whoever's possessed, like the figure that looks like the mother takes the child, and then the child is just standing outside with the living dead, and the dad's like, Ian, come back, Ian, and he's like, come over with us, father, and like act that way at all. And I was also wondering, can he hear dad, or he can just assume he can read dad's lips or assume what dad is saying? I don't know if that's supposed to have been a change.
Not because he's supposed to be deaf. Maybe he wasn't deaf.
Or maybe it like changed once, because I don't think he was bad in the beginning. I think it just took effect when he.
I think once his birthday, once 1201 came through, then he became whatever he was supposed to be. So the offspring of Satan, and then he was able to hear.
maybe not be misinterpreting. And then the savant comes to the rescue and says, everyone get in the truck now. And they were like me, like, we're not waiting a second, we're getting out of here. And we see the grandmother, the ghost
Holding the door.
holding the door where all these zombies are trying to come out of the house as the family runs in. And the father does say, he's like, we need to get Ian. And the savant guy says, he was never your son. Accept it. And they did. And, I have to admit, that's probably why it's good I'm not a parent. I would have been like, sure, he was never my son because I'm not.
Or it could be like, well, none of these are my kids either, but hey.
True. But Ian did look okay. Like, it seemed like Ian, like, I looked at the cast list for the second one, and it's a lot of the same actors, And it's interesting that this film it's Indonesian, but it feels very similar to a lot of, like you were saying, like The Conjuring and Insidious, in a way where it's a very traditional horror story. And it was interesting how in Pedagore and a little bit in The Queen of Black Magic, it's kind of this idea of inherited trauma. Like you inherit, like something your parents did, something from the past, this inherited trauma. And I liked that because it's like, it's like a generational wealth. We don't know her, but we know generational trauma. So it's interesting to me that he's written 3 films with that same theme, and I like the theme. So.
At the end of this, okay, they made it to the city and everything seems to go well. And then a neighbor comes over, brings some food. And, if you guys need anything, let me know, blah, blah, blah. Because, they just went through hell. So they're trying to get back on their feet. And you see the neighbor goes, next door and, goes to her boyfriend or whatever. And everything seems okay until he says who she was. I'm not going to say this name right, but it's the Darminah, and it's a demon that preys on the weak, and that's from the original. So, but it looks like a woman. So I did not see the original to clarify that, or why does it look more human. But it seemed like in the original she was some kind of maid or helper of the family in the original.
In the original story, when the mother dies, the father hires a housekeeper / babysitter, and that's that character. And when I didn't see the prequel, I'm like, I didn't know this was a prequel, remake. I didn't know any of that when I first saw it. And I'm like, why is the movie ending on like this long shot of these random people dancing? Like, what, did I miss something? And then when I watched it again after knowing it was a prequel, I'm like, it still feels a little bit random. But,
It actually does, because it says it's loosely based on the original. But this one is set in 1981, but the original was 1980. So it's supposed to be a prequel or remake. The timing is different, but then the prequel is supposed to be set in 1982.
1980.
But it's a year before. See, it said if it was a year. Okay, this is what I got here. The original, okay, the one we just watched is a year before. It's supposed to be a prequel or remake, but it says it's a year before the original. The original was 1980, so wouldn't that be 79?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that, or not interesting, I had this. So when I looked differently on Letterboxd and IMDb, some sources said that the original came out in 1980, and then the others said 1982. So I wasn't sure, like what country it was released in. So So the best way for me to think of to describe it is that it's the early 80s. This place
Just
the year before, because I saw 82 and 80 in different places, so I'm like, it must be a country kind of difference.
probably because I got confused on that, and then the demon lady. Like, when did she come in? Like, where is she's from the original? And she's just like this demon that preys on the weak. And then I was like, well, was the family weak? Well, not exactly. The mom was sick, but then yeah, because they were suffering.
Well, they
Um,
hadn't been praying, so maybe and that was something that, which you shouldn't have to watch the original,
yeah.
to really understand, like, something that's supposed to be like a prequel slash remake. Is in the original they emphasize more on how the family stopped praying, which makes sense
Hmm.
completely when all this cult stuff comes into it. Like,
Hmm.
it kind of feels like double dipping, asking, Satan for babies and then still praying to God. So it feels that's double dipping. Can't do both.
Yeah.
Really did. So I like my biggest criticisms are the music swelling up, going up to 11 on the scary, and then the ending. It's a satisfying ending until we just didn't have to, like, if they cut to these people a little bit, like he really wanted to set this up and then went back, just watching the family that we spent so much time with, just doing their own thing. So it's kind of an emphasis on them. And also, I think some folks might not have liked this movie also because there are a lot of characters and it's easy to keep track of them, but you don't get that main protagonist. Like, you would feel like Rini would be more of a main protagonist. But because we really feel each family member of the 4 children, it's a little different, but it's better with the, like, I watch subtitles even with things in English. It's just, some people like that, some people don't. I watched both the dubbed and the subtitles. I watched the dubbed one because I was just like rewatching it and I was doing other things, so and it's funny if you look on Shudder. The dubbed one
Hmm.
has 3 skulls as a rating, and the one with the subtitles has 4. So there's something like that. That's something that interests me when it comes to certain things lost in translation. Like, I recently watched a German film, and somebody that speaks German asked me in a kind way. They're like, "Oh, do you speak German?" Because there's a lot of comedy in that film that you really like, that gets lost even with subtitles because you have to know the German language. And I'm like, I don't. I know tourist German at best. And then I remember when Squid Game was really popular, and a lot of folks in South Korea were saying, even with the subtitles, even though we have way too many words in English because we have so many words for like the same darn thing. But
Hmm.
there's certain words. My partner's Swedish, and he says there's just certain words that, like, they don't translate into English. And I remember when people were talking about the translation from the characters in Squid Game, like, there was a little bit missing there, So that interests me. So it's interesting that people like the subtitle version better than the dub version. So I can't really tell you if that's like the audience that would choose the dub version or if it's just like dubbing really takes away from it. I really think it's the dubbing.
Besides the stuff that you just mentioned, how do you like? Would you recommend this film, or
Yeah,
like,
I definitely would. I would recommend it because it's a film that it has a lot of spooky moments.
Hmm.
It has a lot of the supernatural, which a lot of people are drawn to. And it's not gory except for one scene. So it's a bit more palatable. It depends on the person, but yeah, I really like this movie, and then it kind of was a good introduction um, to Joko Anwar, and I think I would say that I probably like Impetigore a little bit more because it's a little bit more original, a little bit more different. But this one, it just felt it felt like home. It felt a little more traditional,
Okay.
I liked it. I did. So
Well,
otherwise I wouldn't have picked it.
well, that
Do you like it?
is.
What do you think?
Um, I enjoyed it. There were those were only the two parts that I said earlier that was kind of like, okay, what about the kids? Does is each one part of that, or does it jump the each kid as she has more? And how does she get sick? Why is she sick? I mean, I kind of wanted that because I feel like I would understand the connection of this entire cult and why they're so like after the kid, or I don't know. I don't know. That was the only thing that kind of confused me. Other than that, it is entertaining. It does have jump scares. It's a fun horror film. It if you don't mind subtitles, I highly recommend watching that one. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was different. I love foreign horror, regardless if I understand the entire thing or the story. And I just love how they just think outside of the box and go for it. And that's what they did. So I did enjoy it. So, but
Well,
thank you. Huh?
I'm glad I picked one you enjoyed.
Well, thank you. But thank you, Emma, so much for joining me on Shudderary. I really do appreciate that. This was a lot of fun, especially talking to you for the first time. This is I feel so honored because I always see you around.
I feel honored. I mean, you're so organized, and this is such a good idea. And I've been loving the interviews you've done before me, and I'm honored that you asked me. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So, but I have to say this. If you enjoy this video, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment. More Shudderary videos are on its way. Emma, where can people find you?
So if I'm on the social media platform, which I'm on a lot, Emma the Impact, I'm the only one, baby. So look it up. That's me.
Okay. And also, she's a photographer, so I have her email at the bottom there, and I will have more of her links in the description. So.
Oh, I forgot one thing.
What?
I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I am going to be in a documentary.
That is right.
It's similar to. I was fortunate that you asked me on here. It's called Horror and Mental Health, and I'm just someone interviewed. There's a lot cooler people that are interviewed, like Linnea Quigley and that kind of stuff. Jonathan Barkin is the writer director, and the producers are really awesome people. So if you're interested in people talking about mental health and horror, it's supposed to come out in the first quarter of 2022, so look out for that. It has its own. So if you look up mental health and horror documentary, it's on Instagram and Twitter. So look out for that.
Look out for that. So until next time, everyone, make sure you like, subscribe, and check out the other Shudderary videos.
Do it.
More is coming on its way. I swear it is. Anyway.
Do it.
So, but thank you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Emma. Until next time, you guys. Bye-bye.